My parents didn't just betray me, they tried to ruin me. After I walked away from our family business, they demanded I pay back a $100,000 loan. That had no contract, no terms, and was meant to be a gift. When I refused, they hired a lawyer and threatened to sue. But that's when I found the tax records. Turns out, they'd been hiding something far worse, and they'd used my name to do it. So I made a choice. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger, I'd let the IRS treat them like criminals. If you've ever felt cornered by the people who raised you, you're not alone. This story hit hard, and if it moves you too, don't forget to like, subscribe, or share your thoughts below. Let's talk about family loyalty and betrayal. My name is Caitlin Monroe. I'm 31 years old, single, and living in the heart of Chicago. From the outside, people say I look put together, polished even. I run in heels, carry a leather-bound planner, and can match paint swatches like a magician. I'm a residential interior designer, and for years, I poured every ounce of creativity and ambition into a small design firm I co-owned with my parents. Yes, that's right. My mom, Judith, and my dad, Leonard, were my business partners. And for a long time, that felt like a dream. They weren't just my parents. They were visionaries, or so I thought. Mom had an eye for luxury, aesthetics. Dad, he handled the numbers. And me, I was the bridge, the modern millennial edge. They needed to stay relevant. We specialized in upscale home transformations, brownstones in Lincoln Park, lakefront, condos in the Gold Coast, vintage bungalows in need of new life. The company was called Monroe House Studio, and it wasn't just a job, it was my identity. Growing up, I always wanted their approval. I was the only child, the golden girl, who got straight A's, earned her degree in architecture, and turned down big firms to build something together. We'd sit in the office and sip espresso, tossing around design boards and client mock-ups like we were building empires. I trusted them with everything: my career, my money, my future. Our family dinners doubled as business meetings. Birthdays came with slide decks. There wasn't really a home life and work life. It was just us. And maybe that's why I didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface. Because when things were good, they were great. Judith would smile and say, "We're unstoppable, the three of us." And Leonard would nod, adding, "Blood makes business stronger." That line always stuck with me. It made me believe loyalty was unbreakable, like contracts written in DNA. But over time, I started noticing signs, tiny red flags that flickered quietly behind the curtains. Clients complaining about fees I didn't authorize. Vendors reaching out to me for payments that had supposedly already been made. Dad brushing things off with vague reassurances. "It's just paperwork noise, sweetheart. Focus on the design." And then there was the control. Every decision had to be run by them. I couldn't even hire a junior designer without a family vote. They said it was about keeping the vision tight. But it felt like I was always one suggestion away from being too emotional or too impulsive. Even though I brought in half the clients and did 90% of the field work, I was still treated like the kid in the room. Still, I stayed. Because family comes first, right? And thought, maybe I could prove myself more. I pitched new ideas, pivoting to eco-conscious materials, expanding to online consulting, even starting a YouTube channel for interior tips. Every idea got shut down. "That's not our clientele," Judith would say. "We're not influencers," Leonard would add. And every time I swallowed my frustration. Looking back, I think they liked me dependent. The more I grew, the more they seemed threatened. But nothing prepared me for what came after the Sheridan deal. It was our biggest client to date, a gut renovation of a pre-war mansion on Sheridan Road. $1 million budget, huge visibility. But Dad made a risky call. He invested in a new contractor he barely vetted. The guy disappeared halfway through the job with half the money. We were left with a furious client, a half-finished house, and serious reputational damage. I suggested we bring in a consultant to restructure, maybe even pause new projects for 3 months and regroup. But they didn't want to hear it. Instead of owning the mistake, they turned on me. "You should have caught the red flags," my mom snapped. "You're supposed to be the face of the brand," Dad added coldly. It was like watching a mask slide off their faces. I wasn't a partner anymore. I was the scapegoat. The final blow came in the form of an ultimatum. "If you're not aligned with our direction," my dad said, "maybe it's time you step away. But you'll need to pay us back what we've invested in your development, your salary, your training, the tools." I was stunned. "What do you mean I've worked for this company since college, unpaid for 2 years, remember?" Judith shrugged. "We estimated around $100,000. We'll be generous and call it a loan. But if you want out, we want it back." I felt like the air was sucked out of the room. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Finitels. Signed the exit paperwork. I borrowed the $100,000 from my savings and a personal loan. I handed them the check and walked out. No contract, no repayment terms, just their word. Because back then, I still believed they were my parents first and business people second. But 6 months later, that illusion shattered too, when I got a letter from their lawyer threatening to sue me. The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday, tucked between a coupon flyer and a package I didn't remember ordering. It was thick, cream-colored, embossed with the name of a law firm I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some kind of clerical mix-up. But when I tore it open and saw my parents' names at the top of the page, my stomach dropped. It was a formal demand for repayment, the $100,000 they claimed to have lent me upon my departure from Monroe House Studio. No mention of goodwill. No acknowledgement that I'd worked nights, weekends, holidays, often without pay, in the early years. Just cold, legal language bullet points and a due date, pay in full within 14 days, or face legal action. I sat in silence, the letter trembling in my hands. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant. My parents hadn't just turned their backs on me. They were preparing to take me to court. I was no longer their daughter. I was a line item on their ledger. I called them immediately, still hoping naively that this was all a misunderstanding. "Mom," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. What is this?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "It's what's fair, Caitlin," she said flatly. "We gave you a start in that business. It's only right that you repay it. But we never agreed it was a loan," I said, feeling my heart race. "There's no contract, no paperwork. You just decided this now." It was always implied. My dad cut, and his voice clipped and cold. "You benefited. Now you're responsible. And threatening to sue me is your idea of parenting." There was silence on the other end, and then a click. They hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in my apartment, surrounded by design books and swatches I couldn't bear to look at. Everything I loved, everything I built, suddenly felt tainted. I started questioning myself. Had I imagined our closeness? Were those family dinners just business meetings in disguise? Did they ever really believe in me? Or was I just useful? Friends offered sympathy. Some were outraged. Others just blinked and said, "That's why you never mix family and money." But it wasn't that simple. These were the people who raised me, who told bedtime stories, who cheered at my high school graduation, who stood next to me in a ribbon-cutting photo for our first studio. I didn't want revenge. I wanted answers. In the days that followed, I met with a lawyer of my own. She listened carefully, flipping through the demand letter, and then looked up at me with a furrowed brow. "There's something strange here," she said. "There's no formal contract. It's going to be hard for them to prove this was a legitimate loan." That gave me hope briefly. But then she added, "However, they're also naming you in a few past expense documents tied to Monroe House Studio. Do you know anything about that?" I blinked. "What kind of documents?" "Tax filings, cost allocations, certain deductions that on paper look like they were made in your name." My blood ran cold. I asked her to send them to me. When I opened the PDF later that night, I saw line after line of expense reports, all tied to my name. Travel costs, supply orders, even business meals in states I'd never been to, and the signature on the forms. It wasn't mine, but it looked close. That's when I remembered something strange from 2 years earlier, back when my dad asked me to sign a few things real quick before a vendor meeting. I hadn't looked too closely. I trusted him, and now I realized I had signed tax documents without even knowing what they were. My heart started to pound. If those filings were submitted with false information and tied to my name, I could be held liable. This wasn't just a family spat anymore. This was federal. I could be charged with tax fraud. Suddenly, the $100,000 demand felt like the least of my worries. I confronted them, again, this time through a letter from my lawyer, asking for a full accounting of any documents submitted on my behalf during my time at Monroe House Studio. They didn't respond, but I didn't need them to, because I started digging. I went through every old email, every bank statement, every shared Google Drive folder, and what I found made my skin crawl. Dozens of fabricated invoices, altered dates, payments routed through multiple business accounts, some of which I didn't even know existed. And time after time, my name was on the paperwork tied to deductions that were far outside the scope of my work. Judith and Leonard hadn't just been shady. They'd been running a full-scale tax evasion scheme using me as part of the cover. I was furious, devastated, scared, but most of all, I was done being quiet. I spent the next week in a haze, barely eating, barely sleeping, replaying every moment of the past decade through a new sickening lens. How could they do this to me? Not just the lawsuit, not just the silence, but this weaponization of my trust, my signature, my name. I wasn't just their daughter, I was their human shield. I started having panic attacks at night. I'd wake up choking on air, drenched in sweat, convinced there were federal agents outside my apartment. My inbox became a landmine. Every ding made my stomach twist. Was it the IRS? An indictment? A subpoena? And the worst part, I couldn't talk to anyone about it. How do you explain to your friends that your own parents might have made you complicit in federal tax fraud? I remember sitting in the shower one morning, water scalding hot, trying to wash off the feeling of betrayal. But it clung to me, thick and sticky, like tar. My lawyer kept me grounded. She was calm, strategic, and tough as nails. "We need to act fast," she told me. If there's any indication you were knowingly involved, this could get ugly. But if you come forward first, we may be able to shield you from prosecution. Come forward, to who I asked. She met my eyes. The IRS, the Treasury Department. Whoever's handling white-collar crimes in this district. My breath caught. I never imagined I'd be sitting in an office downtown with binders full of evidence preparing to turn in my own family. But that's exactly where I was 2 weeks later. I remember the investigator's face, neutral but sharp, like a man used to peeling back layers of polite lies. He flipped through every page I brought. Emails, spreadsheets, signed tax returns with forged elements, backdated invoices. When he looked up, he didn't blink. You're telling me you had no knowledge of these deductions? I didn't even know they existed, I said quietly. Did you sign these? Some, yes, but I didn't know what I was signing. My dad handed them to me. He said it was standard paperwork. There was a long pause. He scribbled something down. This could have gone very differently, he said. You're lucky you came forward. I swallowed hard. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like my insides were unraveling. Over the next few weeks, they launched a formal audit, and things started moving fast. I was asked to come in for additional interviews, to hand over access to old drives, to explain every financial file connected to Monroe House Studio from the last 7 years. The more I cooperated, the more I realized how deep the fraud ran. Judith and Leonard had created shell vendors, faked receipts, even claimed charitable deductions for donations that were never made. And somehow, in at least 4 separate tax years, my name had been listed as the primary filer for business activity I didn't approve and didn't profit from. That meant one terrifying thing. If the government wanted to make an example out of me, they could. I could go to prison because of them. I didn't cry in front of the agents. I didn't cry in the lawyer's office. I didn't even cry when I got the official notice that I was no longer considered a primary target of the investigation. But I did cry the day I saw my mom and dad walk into that federal building for questioning. I saw them through the glass, Leonard, in a stiff blazer, Judith clutching her purse like it could protect her from the truth. They didn't look at me. They didn't even ask me why. It hurt more than I thought it would. I wasn't hoping for forgiveness, but a glimmer of regret, a moment of humanity, something. Instead, all I got was silence. Even as the investigation widened, eventually freezing their business accounts, seizing assets, and launching a full probe into their corporate practices, they never reached out. Not once. It was like I'd been erased from the family altogether. My aunt called me one night after it hit the news. "Caitlin, sweetheart," she whispered, "are you okay? Your parents say you betrayed them, that you reported them." I took a deep breath. "I didn't betray them," I said. "They betrayed me. I just stopped covering for it." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. I still carried the guilt, the shame, the ache of being the one who ripped the bandage off our perfect little family illusion. People always talk about justice like it's some bright glowing thing, but in real life, it's cold, messy, lonely. It didn't take long for the news to spread. By the end of the week, a local business column ran a headline, "Monroe House Studio under federal investigation for tax fraud." They didn't mention my name directly, but they didn't need to. Anyone who'd ever worked with us clients, contractors, even fellow designers knew who the third partner was. My inbox exploded. Some people messaged just to say they were shocked or disappointed. Others accused me outright. "How could you turn in your own parents?" one email read. No matter what they did, you're still their daughter. Someone even DM'd me. Wow. You'll burn your own blood for money. Hope it was worth it. It was like drowning in a sea of moral judgments, none of which knew the truth. They didn't know about the falsified records, the forged signatures, the sleepless nights wondering if I'd go to jail for a crime I didn't commit. All they saw was a daughter snitching on the people who raised her. I stopped going out. I canceled lunch meetings. I stayed off social media. The world felt colder, smaller. Even the apartment, my sanctuary, felt like it was closing in on me. I started questioning everything. Maybe I should have just paid the $100,000 and disappeared. Maybe keeping the peace was worth more than the truth. Maybe love meant silence. But every time I started to spiral, I went back to one moment, sitting across from that IRS investigator as he showed me a document. My name at the top, a signature that looked almost like mine, and a $28,000 deduction listed for luxury materials procurement in a city I'd never set foot in. That wasn't love. That was exploitation. And I'd had enough of being used. Still, the backlash hurt more than I wanted to admit, especially when it came from people I once admired. One former client, someone whose lake house I had personally designed, down to the custom cabinetry, canceled her follow-up project with a one-sentence email. Given recent events, we will no longer be moving forward. Another former colleague posted a vague statuses. Sad how success makes some people turn on the ones who help them rise. I wanted to scream, to respond, to defend myself. But my lawyer advised silence. You've done the right thing, she said. Now let the investigation speak for itself. The problem was, silence felt like punishment, like letting them win. Especially Judith, because even while under investigation, she had the audacity to post on Facebook. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears your last name. I stared at that post for hours, dozens of comments beneath it, sympathy, encouragement, people calling her strong and graceful for enduring such family hardship. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, but instead I opened a blank document on my laptop, and for the first time in months, I wrote, not for business, not for defense, just for me. I poured everything out. The betrayal, the fear, the guilt, the grief. I wrote for hours, then days, not just one draft, 10, then 20, and slowly something began to shift. The words weren't just therapy, they were clarity. I had been raised to believe that family loyalty was unconditional, that blood came first, that if I ever turned my back, it meant I was broken, disloyal, cold, but that was a lie. Loyalty without accountability is just enabling. And love that demands your silence in the face of wrongdoing, that's not love, that's control. It wasn't until week 5 of the investigation that something unexpected happened. A woman, an old client, messaged me privately. Her name was Melissa. I had redesigned her kitchen 3 years earlier. Her message read, I saw the news. I don't know the full story, but I know you. You were always kind, professional, honest. I'm sorry for what you're going through. If you ever start your own firm, I'll be your first client, I cried. Not because of what she said, but because it was the first time in weeks someone believed in me. Not in the narrative, not in the headlines, but in me. and it cracked something open inside me. Maybe I didn't have to hide anymore. Maybe I didn't need permission to reclaim my voice. Maybe, just maybe, this collapse wasn't the end. It was the foundation of something new. After weeks of silence, I stopped hiding. The very next day, I scheduled a follow-up meeting with the investigators. I didn't just bring documents, I brought context. I shared old emails, handwritten notes, phone logs. I connected dots they hadn't even considered. Every little detail I remembered: the sketchy vendor payments, the missing invoices, the don't ask questions conversations from years ago suddenly had weight. And the agents listened closely. Because unlike my parents, I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was cooperating, proactively, transparently, and that made all the difference. A week later, they confirmed something that both devastated and vindicated me. Judith and Leonard Monroe were officially being charged with tax fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government. Their business accounts were frozen, properties seized, and soon a federal indictment became public. This time, the headline didn't mention me at all. It simply read, "Monroe House Studio Founders Face Federal Charges in 1.2 M Tax Fraud Scheme." I sat in my kitchen phone in hand, reading every word with trembling fingers. I should have felt triumphant, but I didn't. I felt released, like I'd finally dropped a weight I'd carried since the day they turned on me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And truth, real undeniable truth, has a way of doing its own justice. But the story wasn't over yet. With the investigation concluded and my name officially cleared, I made the next big move. I launched my own design firm. I called it Found Space. Not Monroe, not Studios, not any elegant name meant to sound expensive, just Found Space. Because that's what I'd created for myself. A space that was finally mine. No gaslighting, no manipulation, no one stealing credit or signatures, just honest, inspired work. And people noticed. Melissa, the client who messaged me during the darkest moment, followed through. She brought in 2 of her friends. Then those friends brought in 3 more. Within the first month, I had more client inquiries than I could handle. Not because I had some big PR spin, not because I played the victim, but because I told the truth. And people were tired of perfection. They wanted real. Still, I wasn't done healing. So, when a local TEDx chapter reached out. After reading my blog post I'd written during my lowest point, I almost said no. Talk about what I asked, that my parents committed fraud, but the organizer just smiled. No. Talk about how you survived it, and so I did. The night of the event, I stood in front of 300 strangers in a black blazer and shaking knees, clutching a microphone tighter than I needed to. I told them everything. About being raised in a house where silence was loyalty. About watching my name be used like a business tool. About choosing truth, even when it cost me everything. And then I said this family is supposed to be the foundation we build on. But if that foundation is cracked rotten, sometimes you don't renovate. You rebuild from scratch. And you make something stronger than what came before. The room went quiet. Then applause. Long, sustained, genuine applause. It wasn't fame. It wasn't revenge. It was peace. 2 months later, I got a certified letter forwarded from my old address. It was from my mother. The envelope was thin, just 1 page, typed, no apology, no remorse. It simply said, "We never thought you'd take it this far. I hope it was worth it. I read it once, then again, and then I laughed. Because they still didn't get it. This wasn't about punishment, or money, or revenge. This was about refusing to let someone else write the ending of my story, and I'd finally taken the pen back. It's been almost a year now. The Monroe name no longer echoes in luxury real estate circles. Their assets were liquidated, their studio dissolved, and they disappeared from the public eye. I sometimes wonder where they are now, if they still blame me, or if in some quiet corner of their minds, they finally saw themselves clearly. But the truth is, it doesn't matter anymore. I have a small team now. 3 designers, 2 interns, 1 incredible office dog named Juniper. We work out of a cozy loft in West Loop filled with plants, laughter, and the kind of energy I used to only dream about. Clients come in not just for design, but for a sense of clarity of rebuilding. Many of them have their own scars. I see it in their eyes. And somehow, they trust me with more than their walls. They trust me with their stories. One woman cried during our first meeting. She said, "This is the first space I've built that's only mine." I smiled and said, "Me too." And in that moment, I knew everything I'd endured meant something. Justice doesn't always come in handcuffs or courtrooms. Sometimes it comes in quiet mornings, in work that fulfills you, in peace you fought for, and in knowing deep down that you didn't let the darkness define you. During that TEDx talk, I ended with a line I hadn't even planned to say. It just came out from somewhere real. Family is the foundation we build from. But if that foundation rots, you don't stay. You don't cover it with a rug. You tear it out. And you start again, brick by brick on your own terms. And that's exactly what I did.